Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, also known as the Nazi-Soviet Pact. This is part of the GCSE history course about international relations from 1918 to 39. So the Third Reich, that's Germany, was eager to annex Poland, but they're worried that if they did so, this might come across as menacing to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a mighty country based around Russia. It was Russia, the Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, 11 countries united into one, the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union had a communist political ideology. So the Nazi government of Germany had been at loggerheads with communism. The Nazis in Germany used to march around town with banners saying "Death to Marxism." Marxism is another name for communism. In August 1939, Joachim Ribbentrop, that's the German foreign minister, he flew to Moscow and he met Vyacheslav Molotov. And Molotov was the Soviet foreign minister. It's a curious coincidence that neither von Ribbentrop or Molotov were using their real surnames. Ribbentrop was Ribbentrop, not von Ribbentrop as he called himself, and Molotov's surname was something completely different. He certainly wasn't Hammer of, as he called himself. So on the 23rd of August, an agreement was signed, and this was the most mind-blowing political move, because these two governments were supposed to absolutely detest each other. Some people of goodwill in other countries had become communists because they thought that communists were the deadly enemies of this vicious Nazi ideology. Anyway, it was a 10-year non-aggression pact, and that's why it was a little bit credible. If the Nazis promised eternal non-aggression, that would not have been believable. So it was a stunning political development. Nobody saw this one coming. They supposedly been at each other's throats, sworn to fight to the death, and all of a sudden they were kissing and making up. People couldn't believe it. For 20 years, the Nazis had been fulminating against communism in the purplest prose, and all of a sudden they were buddying up. So the communists had execrated German nationalists as the foulest breed on earth, and now they were hugging them. There were secret annexes to the agreement that when Germany invaded Poland, that the Soviet Union would not oppose that, and indeed the Soviet Union would get Eastern Poland. Remember, the eastern half of Poland had been part of the Russian Empire until the end of the First World War. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they could all become part of the Soviet Union, and indeed so could a bit of Finland, just because the Soviet government wanted that, not because most people in those countries wished to join the Soviet Union. And a part of Romania, called Bessarabia, would join the Soviet Union. It's now called Moldova. And Germany would not oppose any of this, so giving each other a free hand in Eastern Europe. There was a small German ethnic minority in Poland. There were no more than 5% population, and Nazi propaganda would have you believe that they were monstrously mistreated. And this claim of barbarous treatment is bogus, though, all right, there was some anti-German animus in Poland. Some Germans were racist towards the Poles. So nobody should be mistreated for their ethnicity. I don't want to have negative stereotypes against anyone, and I don't want there to be any hostility towards Germans. Nobody should be mistreated for their ethnicity, and that includes Germans. So there was Danzig, which was 90% ethnically German. It was nominally a League of Nations territory, but effectively administered by the Poles. The Polish army was there. But the Nazi Party existed there, shows that the Poles were actually quite fair, and the Nazi Party were elected to the city council. German secret agents and special forces went into Poland in late August 1939 and started setting off bombs as part of destabilization, cutting communications in Tarnów. They set off a bomb in the railway station, killing a few people. German prisoners from concentration camps were brought to a radio station at Gliwice, near the Polish frontier. They were dressed in Polish army uniforms and then shot dead. Their bodies were left on the ground, and foreign journalists were summoned. A Polish broadcast was broadcast from the station. It was an anti-German message. Foreign journalists were brought to see the corpses and told, see, Polish soldiers attacked us and we shot dead. These guys, there was only about a dozen of them. If Poland really wanted to invade Germany, they wouldn't send so few. They'd have a proper scale invasion. So this was Germany's jus ad bello, justification for war. That was the 1st of September 1939, and at dawn, the German army opened up its artillery on Polish positions. A German warship, the Schleswig-Holstein, was even on a courtesy visit to Danzig, Gdansk as it is in Polish, allowing civilians to walk around the ship because they're such good friends. The Poles couldn't believe it. They thought they were mates with the Germans. They'd had a non-aggression pact with them in 1934, a 10-year non-aggression pact. They'd had their foreign minister, Colonel Beck, invited to Germany a few months earlier, where he'd been greeted with great respect. So that was that. The Second World War started. Hitler was convinced that nobody would declare war on him. 2 days later, the British ambassador, Henderson, in Berlin, he gave the German government a document saying that unless by 11 o'clock you signal you will immediately withdraw from Germany, then the United Kingdom will declare war on you. Well, the war had already started. The German troops were pushing deep into Poland. They weren't going to pull out. I suppose the Germans could have stalled for time and said, oh yes, maybe, or just give the note anyway. But when there was no communication by 11 o'clock, George VI declared war on the Third Reich. And Hitler was shocked because his foreign minister, Molotov-Ribbentrop, had convinced him that the United Kingdom would not declare war because the British were invertebrate. And Hitler said, so what happens now? And Ribbentrop said, well, the French probably declare war too. And they did that afternoon. So Hitler had been brought to office by the Great Depression, really. This has discredited democracy in the eyes of ordinary Germans. It lent a spurious plausibility to his absurd claim that Jewish bankers were plotting to ruin Germany. So that was that. The UK was at war. The dominions like Canada, South Africa, Australia, they were internally self-governing, and they were not immediately at war against the Third Reich, but they all chose to declare war in the coming days. Some of them tarried for a bit because then there were neutral countries and they could import things from places like the United States that they wouldn't be allowed to import if there were belligerents in a war. So that was how the Second World War began. The League of Nations still carried on. It wasn't formally wound up until 1946. So the British and French had been desperately thinking, is there a way we can get out of war, not have to declare war? The British Prime Minister at the time, Chamberlain, was uninspiring, and he said in his radio broadcast that it's a bitter blow to me, and that he'd striven to avoid war, found every possible way, and that's true. And he's denounced, I think he's underrated, because he wanted to stay at peace. Is it a bad thing to want peace? Surely we should prefer war, and if we thought there was any possibility of peace, he went for it. Now, even in 1939, there were some people, when war was declared, like Mosley, the British fascist leader, saying, no, who the heck would die for Beck? The Polish foreign minister, Poland nothing to do with us, stay out of it, mind Britain's business. It's not our problem. There are a lot of annexations, it's not our problem. Of course, 2 weeks after the Third Reich invaded Poland, the Soviet Union attacked it from the east, and Poland was finished off in short order. After about 3 weeks, the French and British did nothing effective to help the Poles. There was, the Germans were sinking a few British ships, but the French and British did not attack Western Germany. British Expeditionary Force went to France because they expected a German attack later on. The Poles were saying, come on, help us, launch a diversion, attack Germany's western flank. And the French and Polish did nothing. Anyway, that's enough about the outbreak of the Second World War.